We continue with the jury trial, Voir dire, Day 1, Part 4. Attorney Strang. I have encountered from the state a number of objections to questions of mine on individual voir dire that I regard not only as proper and unexceptionable, but necessary here. Probably not phrased in a sterile way, but there is no requirement of which I'm aware of that sterility control the process of individual voir dire or general voir dire. And I need to air out just exactly what parameters the court thinks I'm invading, or what the objections are, so that we can deal with that. Because my voir dire here is being hampered materially. Attorney Fallon. I understand where counsel is coming from, and it's not something that I ordinarily object to. Here are my only two concerns or complaints. One, I just don't think it's fair to interject facts, for instance, regarding what the jurors should know about the past. The question is, what do they know about the past? Constantly interjecting opinions about, well, he testified in the first case and he was found guilty and shouldn't have been. And what if he doesn't testify in this case? That's conditioning of the jury. That's one set of questions that I do strongly take exception to. The introduction of facts as opposed to let's find out from them what they think the facts are, or what they know the facts to be. The other questions regarding the presumption of innocence and the burden of proof in it, I understand exactly where he's going to, and most of it I don't object to. My problem is, it is in the wording, because the presumption of innocence, the real essence is, well, can you take it to heart, or do you believe in it? Well, that's nice, and it might be helpful, but the real question is, can you accept it, and will you follow it? That's the essence of it. And whether they are going to get warm and fuzzy over it is not the issue here. And so I understand completely where counsel is going, and I empathize with that. I just object to the phrasing on those issues, because they are important. They are certainly entitled to know that information. My objection there is strictly the way they are being approached and asked. Attorney Strang. Well, with all due respect, the question whether a juror can or will follow a legal rule satisfies the issue of cause to excuse them. And the question of what a juror believes, what a juror accepts, how a juror reacts to propositions, is this something that sticks in the craw, or something that makes the juror want to stand up and wave an American flag, is exactly the sort of thing that goes to the second purpose of voir dire, which is the intelligent exercise of a peremptory strike. And it's also entirely appropriate in this case or any other to give some concrete meaning to an abstraction like the presumption of innocence. Because here that means they got the wrong guy. That means he didn't do it. That's what I'm presuming, or I'm asking a juror to presume, and I have a right to have them presume. So to get them talking and get some sense of what it is these people really believe, and what it is they will simply live with, a bridle on or not, spit out the bit, is the essence of what we're trying to do in deciding how to exercise but 7 peremptory strikes. The court. Well, I'm not sure how I can respond precisely to comments that relate to a variety of objections, some of which I have sustained, some of which I have overruled. I recall a couple of questions related to something involving the defendant testifying at the 1985 case. It's not immediately apparent to me why that would be relevant to this case. I don't think it's something necessarily that the jury is going to hear. I have to confess, it hasn't been the subject of any pretrial motions, and perhaps there's an explanation I haven't heard yet. But to the extent that the questions start getting into specific evidence, especially evidence that the jury may or may not hear, the court is going to be reluctant to allow those types of questions. In other cases, the court sustained the objection simply based on the phrasing of the question, and I don't think I can give you any advance indication as to whether or not I might sustain or overrule any other objection other than to make those comments. I agree that both parties are entitled to some flexibility in order to draw out the juror and get an honest answer to questions that are directly relevant to determining whether or not the jury can be impartial. But once the parties start getting into hypothetical questions or questions that might be somewhat misleading, I will sustain the objections. Attorney Strang: well, of course, the fact that he testified in 1985 and was convicted all the same is not at all hypothetical, and it's a wonderful, specific, concrete example that may bring home to a juror the importance of this rule that we have, that one has a privilege not to testify in a criminal case if you're the accused, and innocent people well might choose to do that for good reasons. The court: well, that's true, but it's not necessary to ask the question in this case, and it is something that may well be determined to be irrelevant evidence if it was attempted to be introduced in trial, and I just don't see the necessity or reason for it. Attorney Strang: well, the reason is that we've got, I can't give the court a number right now, but we have several jurors who wrote on their questionnaires, "I need to hear the defendant," or "an innocent man would testify," words to that effect. We've got jurors who have written down that opinion, and jurors, I should say prospective jurors, panel members. And my guess, knowing human nature, is that for everyone who has written it down, there are 3 or 4 who believe it and haven't written it down. And I clearly am in a position representing someone who may not testify in this case. The court: don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that you can't ask questions that are meant to ask the jury if they can accept our rule that the defendant doesn't have to testify. But I don't think it's necessary to tell the jurors, and Mr. Avery did testify in his 85 case, in order to drive home the point. That's what I'm saying. Attorney Fallon: and, just an example. Then, if counsel wants to ask the question, well, can you think of any reasons why the person wouldn't want to testify? And, we have the advice of counsel, we have the inartful speaker, and perhaps a few other things they would like to suggest. Does that mean that I get to say, well, what do you think of the fact that he has got 6 inconsistent statements about what he did in the first 8 days of this investigation? What about the fact that he has a felony record? I can play that routine too, but I don't want to. I don't think it's appropriate. I just think we're opening a box here. The court: well, I agree that if the questions go too far in that regard, I would stop them. If a juror says, no, I can't think of any reason why the defendant wouldn't want to testify, that doesn't necessarily make the juror unqualified. It just may mean that the juror can't come up with a specific reason. But as long as the question is brief, there are a number of jurors, and it's not just this trial, it's any criminal trial, will get up and say, yeah, I think the defendant should testify, so I can hear the defendant's side of the story. The defense is entitled to a brief education to explain to the juror why our rules don't require that. And as long as the time isn't abused, I'm going to allow it. Attorney Fallon: I don't have any objection to that. The court: Diane, can you do another one before we take our break? How are you doing? Court reporter: I think we can take our break. The court: all right, let's take our break. We'll resume in 15 minutes. 25 to 3. Recess taken. Voir dire examination by Attorney Fallon. Good morning, Ms. Schmidt. Good afternoon. My name is Tom Fallon. I'm an Assistant Attorney General with the Wisconsin Department of Justice. I'm one of the prosecutors in this case, and we each have just a few questions to follow up on some of the information you provided last Monday in your questionnaire, and a few other related questions to help us in selecting the jury this week. In terms of the information provided, I take it you are currently just working at home? Yes, sir. Okay, and you have formerly did some work at a temporary service? Yes, sir. Most of the time I stayed at home. Okay, taking care of my family. I see, yes, and you've done well? You have 3 sons and a daughter? 4 sons. There wasn't room on the paper for the other one. When you did work outside the home, what type of work did you do? Well, it varied. If I worked at the temporary service, it was like sorting bolts or packing. If I worked at someplace else, it was probably like catering service type of thing. That's about it. So you did a variety of things? Yes. Okay. How often did you work in the temporary service? Well, my youngest son is 14, so I just said I started working about 6 years ago again. And what was the last thing you did when you worked for the temporary service? What kind of work was it? Sorting and packing. And for whom did you do that work? CASO. Well, it's through ABR, but I believe it was CASO Corporation. CASO Corporation. You did answer one question, and I don't mean to pry, but we did want to make sure that it would be all right with you. But on one question, in terms of health concerns, you indicated high blood pressure. Yes, sir. Okay, is it more or less under control, or is that something? I take a pill every morning, and I usually do that about 5 or so. And if you were able to keep up that regimen, do you think your blood pressure would be under control such that you could sit as a juror? I think so. Otherwise, it shouldn't present a problem for you? No, sir. Is that a recent condition you've been working with, or is it something? I would say it's about 8 years that I've been diagnosed with it. Okay. And have you been taking pills for it? Oh, and have been taking pills for it. All right. So you're pretty experienced then in managing it and keeping it under control? Yes, sir. Thanks. Of the sources of news that you have, where would you say you get most of your news from? The radio. From the radio? Yes, sir. What type of stations do you listen to? WOMT. That's from morning until about 9. Then it goes to Sheboygan Station, I believe. Don't know what it is, but they play generally easy listening music. Okay. Then it's back to WOMT, and that's on until about 6, 7 at night. Have you been following the coverage of this case on the radio? No, sir. Every time it came on, I turned it off, or I walked out of the room. Is there any particular reason why I wasn't interested in, anything like that? So would it be fair to say you really haven't followed the coverage of this case hardly at all? Yes, sir. I guess you could say that. All right. You are aware that Mr. Avery is accused of killing Teresa Halbach? I take it you are aware of that? Yes. Okay. But you haven't paid attention to any of the details? Not as far as what's going on, no. All right. Can you tell us a little bit about what you actually do remember from what little you've listened to or watched? Mostly the names that have appeared. Mr. Avery, Ms. Halbach, that's all. All right. Do you recognize the name Dassey, Brendan Dassey? Is that name familiar? You are familiar with? I know the name. It appeared once in a while, but I don't know what it's... You don't know what it's concerning? No. You don't know the connection? No, sir. Of that name with the case? No, sir. All right. You indicated in your questionnaire that you did watch at least one type of television crime show, that being CSI, Crime Scene Investigation. Yes, sir. How often do you watch that show? Well, it depends on if we have other things going on around the house, like butchering and stuff. It's not every week, I know that. But when I do watch it, it's mostly to see the people, not what they're doing, but because the storyline once in a while is interesting. You like the characters? Yes. Okay. You indicated you found the show somewhat realistic. Any particular reason why that would be? Well, sometimes how they scrape the fingernails and things like that. The court. All right, I think we can resume. Change microphone batteries. Very good. Let's see, where were we? We were talking about CSI and whether it was realistic or not. Realistic or not. The thing I watch when the story gets kind of confusing is, well, like that I know they take fingernail scrapings, and the rest of the stuff is kind of iffy because you don't know for sure. In terms of its reliability, or whether or not we have the capability of doing it. You probably have the capability, but they show things every week or whatever. It's supposed to be a crime that has been committed. And I know that things don't happen that way, It's got to be usually a longer period of time. They don't have them every day. Or at least they're not solved every day. I certainly hope they're not solved every day. All right, I'm going to go back to one of the first questions. You indicated farming and butchering. What kind of farm does your family have? It's a working farm, but we have cattle, we have pigs, we have chickens and ducks and geese. And my husband and my son run. We have 80 acres. And then woods. The guys all go to the woods and make wood for the winter that we can burn in the house. Not a dairy farm per se? No, it's not a dairy farm. The cattle are beef. Okay, is that the primary source of income for the farm, the beef? Yeah, and the chickens. The pork? Well, the pork mostly is for ourselves. Okay, very good. You did leave one question unanswered that is of some importance. Two questions, actually, and I guess I will close with those two. One question. You were asked if you served on a jury, or you were selected for this particular jury, how would you feel about that service? It wouldn't bother me. All right. The only thing that would probably bother me would be making up my mind at the end, if it happened the way that was presented to me or not. All right. So in other words, you actually getting down to making a decision might be kind of difficult. Weighing the evidence? Yes. All right. But there's nothing else about the process that, no, you would find difficult? No. Okay. And the last question we touched briefly upon in the beginning with health and family. But it's very possible this case will go 6 weeks. As Judge Willis told you, you would be able to go home every night and things of that sort. But is there any particular personal hardship or, would this be really hard on the family business or anything like that if you were here 8, 9 hours a day as opposed to being back managing the family business at home? No, sir. My husband's retired. He runs most of the business around there if people stop for eggs or whatever. And my older son he's a senior this year, and the next one is an 8th grader. The 12-year-old, yeah. But not my oldest son. He's away from the house, but the second youngest. Okay. In all your years here in Manitowoc in that business, have you ever had any encounters with the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department? Not that I know of. They might have, stopped for some reason or other, but I couldn't tell you for sure. All right. Do you have any impressions at all as to whether you think they're doing a good job for you here in Manitowoc? Bad job? A fair job in terms of... It must be fair because I haven't had any complaints about anybody. Okay. Do you have any friends or family members who work in the news business? No, sir. Attorney Fallon. That's all. Thank you. The court. Mr. Buting? Attorney Buting. Thank you, Judge. Voir dire examination by Attorney Buting. Good afternoon, ma'am. My name is Jerome Buting, and I, along with Dean Strang, are the attorneys representing Mr. Avery here today. Do you understand that? Yes? Okay. I want to follow up on a few of Mr. Fallon's questions, and maybe some of my own as well. All right? First of all, I heard you mention that most of the time you have worked in the home, but occasionally you worked at a temporary service, right? Yes, sir. You mentioned CASO Corporation? Yes, sir. That was through ABR, and they sent me out there before Christmas, 2005. Okay. And it was just packing bolts. Not bolts. It was like little gear things, and they had to inspect them as far as if the ringings were tight or not. Okay. And then the person inspected them, and then they were given to us, and we had to pack them. And that's all we had to do. Is that the only time you worked for CASO? Yes, sir. Do you happen to know a woman who also worked there? I'm not sure if it's the same time, by the name of Terry Tomei? No, sir. Okay. Before today, did you know any of the prospective jurors that you have encountered? No, sir. They're all strangers to you? Yes, sir. Okay, let's talk about what you heard before. What you have heard. Maybe at the very beginning about this case in the media, okay? Yes, sir. That's about all I heard in the very beginning. Okay, tell me what you recall hearing about this case in the media at the very beginning. What do I recall? Well, that someone was murdered, and they are assuming that Mr. Avery did it. And they said, I think they told me Miss Halbach's name, but I can't remember anything else on it because, like I said, I wasn't interested in it at the time. Do you remember any information about why they were assuming Mr. Avery was involved? No, sir. Okay. Did you ever hear any details about anyone who may have made any confessions? No, sir. See, if we're not busy around the farm at that time, which is about 6 o'clock, and it's after our meal time, and it's usually after our chore time, and I have other things to do if we're butchering, or if the kids need help with their schoolwork. Very seldom that we listen to the news. And then when I go up at 6, I usually have game shows on like Jeopardy. Sure, well, I think at one point you said that every time anything about this case came on, you would turn it off the radio, or you would walk out of the room? I would. Why? Well, I wasn't interested in that. Well, okay, but mostly the radio is on for music. Sure. And we hear, once in a while, bits and pieces of news, but mostly it's for the weather. But if the radio is just sort of on in the background, sounds like for hours and hours a day, right? All day, yes. Okay, what is it about any kind of reports about this case, though, that would make you want to turn it off? I don't know, sir. I just wasn't interested in it. Was there something about it that you just said, I have heard enough of this? I've heard too much of this. I'm sick of this? Could be in the beginning. I don't know what it is. I just turn it off. Is there anything you heard that made you sick to your stomach or disgusted or... Well, I didn't hear the whole report. I couldn't tell you. I just didn't hear it. Okay. When other news would come on, would you turn off the radio or walk out of the room? Other reports of other... Most of the time I listen, but not always. It's like background effect stuff. It goes in one ear and out the other. Sure. And doesn't stop in between to register. Sure, I understand. But other news reports and other cases perhaps, other crimes even, or other things that are going on, or would just kind of let the radio play. Yeah, that's about it. You wouldn't turn it off or walk out of the room? Well, I don't turn it off even when it's on about Mr. Avery. I just kind of ignored it, you know? Okay, so it wasn't... You don't listen totally to it, you just kind of... So you're not saying that you really turned it off because this case would come on the radio? I turned it off because that was me turning it off. I just turned it off. And the fact that Mr. Avery's case might have been being reported on the radio at that moment, you're saying it had no connection? No, sir. To your decision to turn it off? No, sir. Okay, so when you listen to the radio, is it WOMT? They have got news in the early morning, correct? And don't they then change over to music format at some point? I'm trying to think. At 5 o'clock, when the radio goes on, I'm usually making lunch for my son. And then they have a little chatter, a little call-in between them. Yeah, okay, in between them, okay. And then they have like Be My Guest or something on that order, and music in between. Okay, and is it mainly talk and news all day long? Or do they convert over to music? Mostly it's music all day long. There's a couple shows I like Be My Guest or something like that. Those I don't listen to because I'm usually doing something else. Okay, all right. Now, when you were talking about the CSI that you said was the only one, you do try and watch that one pretty regularly? Yeah, but I'm more interested in the storyline as far as, like, the people. The girl was going out with that guy. I see. Or this one got married and stuff like that. You're more interested in that than the story about the crimes that they happen to be investigating? Right. Okay, I see. And do you think that the scientific tests that they do, or they claim to do on the show, are all tests that in fact really can be done, or are done? I would say most of the tests could be done. Okay. I don't know for a fact that they are positively done, but I would say that they could be done. Okay. And they're usually pretty good at finding evidence when a crime happened. They're pretty quick at finding evidence right there that proves it, right? Yes, but how long does it take? Only an hour to show all this interesting stuff. But I'm sure it takes longer than that to run it through a regular lab. Sure. But as a result of that, you think that it's pretty likely that real police are able to do that too? That if a real crime took place, they're able to get there on the scene and find the evidence that will prove it, right? I would think so. Okay. And if they were not able to find any, or significant evidence, or evidence that you might expect they would find at the crime scene, if that was missing in a real case like this, would that trouble you? If the evidence that the person says is there isn't? No. If the evidence that you would think should be there is not? No, I don't think so. They have to show me exactly what was there. I appreciate that, thank you. Now, I'm sorry, did you say you have 4 children? 4 sons? Yeah, 4 sons and a daughter. But there wasn't room enough on the paper for the last one. Okay, so I kind of dropped them off. One got the short straw there? I guess so. Is that son still at home? Yes, he is. He's only 14. 3 sons at home? 35-year-old still there? Yes, sir. Does the 35-year-old work on the farm with your father, your husband? He does most of the work because my husband has a sciatic nerve. Okay. And then he can't run around with the tractors and stuff. But the older son does quite a bit. Okay. But he also works for EBM. He's a foreman. Okay. Do any of your sons, or your husband for that matter, do they ever talk about this case? What they heard about the Stephen Avery case? They might talk to themselves about it. They haven't mentioned it around the table. That's not something they talk about to you? Not at mealtime. Okay, well, what about after they heard that you were selected as a prospective juror for this case? Did they talk to you about it at all? No. Did they talk to you about it in the last week at all? No. And have you heard of any opinions that they have about whether he, Mr. Avery, is guilty or not guilty? They might have opinions, but I don't listen to them. Well, how would you know they would have them if you don't listen to them? Well, because they go out to the greenhouse or whatever, out to the barn. I usually stay in the house, so I don't know what they're discussing. So you're just guessing that maybe they have opinions? That's right. I see. Okay. Now, the judge is going to tell you he's going to give you a number of instructions, sort of rules of the game that you will have to follow. And one of those is the presumption of innocence. Have you heard of that? Yes. Okay. What is that? Well, strike that. Do you think that Mr. Avery is presumed innocent right now? Yes, sir. Do you think that he must have done something or he wouldn't be here? We wouldn't have gotten this far in this proceeding so that we're coming up on the trial? Yes, sir. I would put it that way exactly. Pardon me? I would put it that way exactly. You think he must have done something? Well, yes. Why do you think that? Well, because otherwise he wouldn't be in a courtroom. Okay. Do you think sometimes people who are completely innocent of any crime whatsoever find themselves in the position Mr. Avery is in here? Yes. So why do you think that couldn't apply to Mr. Avery now? That he's innocent? That he is innocent until proven guilty? Okay. What I'm asking, though, is a moment ago you said that you think that he must have done something in order to get himself in the position he is at right now. Yes, sir. Why? Well, evidently he's in jail, and other people that are in jail also, but they have different trials set up for them. Gosh, I don't know how to put it. Well, just try. You're doing fine. Well, first of all of you people are in line, ready to get even with him or whatever. And we don't know until the facts are shown if he is guilty or not guilty. And right now he's innocent. Okay, well, then why do you think he must have done something wrong if he's here today? Because evidently all you people gave evidence to the cops and police, and they arrested him for it. Okay, that's fair. Do you think, though, that sometimes the evidence that the police give may strike that? I'm not going to get hypothetical here. Let me put it this way. Do you know anything about Mr. Avery's background or past? I know he was in jail before. I have no idea why. I know that he got out because something proved him wrong. Different. Okay, something proved that he was innocent? Yes. And do you have any doubts about whether he was really innocent at that time? Yeah. I don't know anything about the case at that time. Okay, well, do you assume that since he was released from prison, everybody must agree he really was innocent? Yes, sir. Okay. Do you think then that it's possible? I mean, there's an example right here, where sometimes someone gets this far and they get to the position of Mr. Avery. In fact, they get much further. They are actually convicted wrongly. So can you consider that Mr. Avery, just because he's here today for this trial, may be entirely innocent of this crime? Yes, sir, I believe he is. Okay, do you think that? By the way, do you know any police officers at all, personally? Not personally. I know Dickie France is constable in town of Two Rivers, but that's as far as I know. Okay. Do you think that if a police officer comes to court and testifies, takes the oath, swears to tell the truth, that necessarily a police officer will always tell the truth under oath? No, sir. Why not? Well, everybody has a tendency to fib once in a while, and just because they're a police officer doesn't mean that they don't have that tendency. Sure. So you would judge a police officer on the witness stand the same as any other witness? Yes, sir. Just because they have on a uniform or badge doesn't make them any more truthful than the ordinary witness. Is that right? That's right. Okay, thank you. Do you think that police officers can, when you say fib, if you're fibbing under oath, that's really perjury, is it not? I believe so. Do you think police could actually go that far? Yes. Attorney Buting. I think that's enough. Thank you very much, ma'am. The court. All right, we'll have the clerk escort the juror out of the room. Counsel, any motion from either party? Attorney Fallon. None from the state. The court. Mr. Buting. Attorney Buting. No, Your Honor. The court. All right, that juror is in. I have received a request. There's a Julie Dorn. She's number 18. She has to go to work at 11 tonight. Maybe she's going to go home to sleep after this, but we'll take her out of order and take her next. Ms. Dorn, could you raise your right hand? Juror sworn. Voir dire examination by Attorney Fallon. Good afternoon, Ms. Dorn. My name is Tom Fallon. I'm Assistant Attorney General for the Wisconsin Department of Justice, and I'm one of the prosecutors in this case. And I wanted to follow up with a few questions about the information you provided in your jury questionnaire and a few other related matters. Thanks for coming this afternoon. I know you're a third shifter, so... That wreaks havoc with your schedule. And in that regard, if we could just start there. You indicate you are a line operator. What is that? Just run a press and you assemble the parts, pack them, different job every night. Oh, okay. So you're like on an assembly line? No, not necessarily. Just a press that you're working out of, and sometimes you're working off a line. I see. It's a different job every night. And how long have you been working at the Bemis Manufacturing? Bemis Manufacturing, total about 8 years, 2 years full-time. 2 years full-time. And before that, what were you doing? Before that, I was unemployed. I stayed home with the kids, and before that was 15 years at Richardson Brothers in Falls. Richardson Brothers Furniture? Furniture in Sheboygan Falls. All right. Was that sales, marketing, office, factory, assembler? Assembly. Very good. How long have you been working the third shift? Third shift, about 7 years. As shifts go, do you like third shift? If you were selected as a juror in this particular case, I take it that wouldn't present any particular health or financial hardship for you? No. If you were selected as a jury, would that be all right? Do you think you would enjoy the experience or tolerate it? Or how would you feel about it? I wouldn't mind it. And as I see from the note here, if I remember correctly, I don't think you have had jury experience before. Is that right? No. There were a couple of questions regarding your knowledge of the facts in this case. Presumably, that would have come from media coverage. Am I correct in assuming that because of the fact you work the third shift, your exposure to the TV coverage is limited? I don't really see, I've seen some of it, but I don't really have to watch it. I go to work I start at 11 at night, work until 7 in the morning, get home at 7:30, do a load of wash, go to bed. Right. Get up, start supper, so it's like there's no time really. Okay, so even if time permitted, you wouldn't say that this was a case of interest to you? Not a necessity. I had other stuff to do. Right. The press of day-to-day living takes its toll? All right, okay. Let me ask then a couple of related questions. In terms of the media exposure that you've had in this case, would you say most of it comes from radio, television, newspaper, magazine, or what? It would have been television. Television, all right. And have you followed any of the recent coverage at all in the case? No. No, specifically. What do you recall about the case from information provided by the media, particularly the television? From what I've seen, from what I watched on television, yeah, that she was missing and then the arrest, and I think it wasn't too much. It was just, those are the two things that caught my attention. All right. I don't remember. I don't really follow it. Okay? And when asked whether you had formed any personal opinions about the case, based on that information, you said no? Right. Do you have any opinions today? No. As to guilt or innocence or anything about the case? No. We were told not to watch anything or read anything, not listen to anybody. And you followed those instructions? Yep. Very good. How long have you been a resident of Manitowoc County? Manitowoc County since 1987. During that time, have you had any encounters or experience with the Manitowoc Police Department or the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department? No. Have you had any opinions as to whether you think the Sheriff's Department is doing a good job, a bad job, a fair job, in terms of fighting crime and serving the public? I don't have an opinion one way or the other? No. Okay, that's all right. Now, in your questionnaire, there were a number of questions that were designed to see if you would follow the instructions of the judge and the law. If you were selected as a juror. One of those questions dealt with the fact that Mr. Avery is presumed to be innocent unless and until the state can prove him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Do you accept that? Right. Do you have any problem understanding that? No. And do you think you would be able to follow on Judge Willis's instructions on that? Mm-hmm. Is that a yes? Yes. Okay. She's trying to type it all down, so sorry. Very good. Similarly, Mr. Avery has the right to testify in this case, and he also has a right not to testify in this case. And if he does not testify in this case, you won't hold that against him? No. All right. In other words, you understand that he has a right not to testify? Right. Okay, and you wouldn't consider that adversely against him if he doesn't testify, in terms of deciding, in the end, whether he's guilty or innocent? Right. It would be on other evidence that was presented, the other evidence provided. Okay, and you have no problem with that? No. And you can follow that instruction? Right. Okay. Are you a movie watcher? Am I a movie watcher? Yeah. Have you ever seen a movie called The Thin Blue Line? No. In terms of your approach to, forming an opinion or solving a problem, do you consider yourself a detail-oriented person? Or are you a big-picture person? Could you repeat? Well, in terms of going about trying to understand a particular point, or trying to evaluate or solve a particular problem, are you kind of a bottom line, big picture, or do you want to know all the details? Detail. You are a detail person, okay? All right. As a detail person, are you one who likes to solve puzzles or riddles or things of that sort? Sometimes. In terms of the puzzles you work on, are those jigsaw puzzles or word puzzles, crosswords? What kind of word puzzles? Word puzzles. Jigsaw once in a while, not puzzles, but mostly words. Okay. Have you ever used a publication such as Auto Trader to buy or sell a car? No. Okay. Are you familiar with the publication at all? No. Since you have not had any prior jury experience, let me ask this question. Do you have any particular religious, moral, or philosophical beliefs that you think might make it difficult for you to sit and deliberate on the guilt or innocence of a person? No. All right. Do you think you'd be able to comfortably handle that task? Right. Attorney Fallon. That's all I have for the witness. The court. Mr. Strang. Voir dire examination by Attorney Strang. Hi. Hi. I'm Dean Strang. This is Jerome Buting, and we're defending Stephen Avery. Back to the beginning. You were born in Chilton? Mm-hmm. How long did you stay in Chilton? I was born in Chilton, but we lived in New Holstein. Oh, okay, New Holstein. So you grew up in New Holstein? No, grew up in Kiel. And hence Kiel High School? Mm-hmm. Kiel High School doesn't pull kids in from New Holstein? No, it's about 4 mile difference. Okay. And then you gave me you gave us the street address where you and your family live now. But I don't know what town that is in. I'm sorry. It would still be Kiel. It's a Kiel school district. Yep. Today? Mm-hmm. Okay. And have you been there, in that house for the last 20 years or so? Right. The cheerleading volunteering, is that for your daughter? Pardon? The cheerleading volunteering that you do, is that for your daughter? Right, yeah. Could be your son. My daughter. Okay. They're twins, the younger? Right, they're twins. And how involved are you guys at the church? Church twice a month. One of the boys, Cody's basketball games, he plays for St. Peter and Paul. That's about it. Okay, that answered my other question. Saints Peter and Paul? Mm-hmm. Bemis. This is what? Well, you have got sort of a habit of working down in the falls, I guess, right? Right. When you're working, do these guys run a full third shift? Yes. Just same as the other two? Right. And this sort of swing operation where you may be doing a different job every night, is that true of the other two shifts as well? Mm-hmm. Right. Now, does that mean you are working with different people every night as well? Right. Uh-huh. Okay, so you really do or you're by yourself. Depends if it's a 1 or 2 person job. Right. Depending on the job you get. So you get a foreman or someone who assigns you. Right. This or that. Different schedule every night when you come in. Okay. Maybe since it's a full shift, I can guess the answer to this, but I'll ask you. Is there a radio, sort of playing all the time? We can bring our own radios in. And do you do that to help pass the time? Yep. What's on the radio between 11 at night and 7 in the morning? Classic rock, the Buzz out of Milwaukee. Okay. That's about all we listen to. I don't listen to 104.5. I don't care for it. Too much talking. I'd rather listen to music. Listening to music. Be a long night if you don't have it. Right. And the talk show gets real weird at night. So you are listening to music? Right. No TV at work? No. I'm assuming. Tell me what you know about Brendan Dassey. I saw the arrest of Brendan, kind of like was Stephen's arrest. That was it. Okay. When you say you saw the arrest of it, like a news conference, that he was supposedly involved, that's it. Was that news conference sort of thing with microphones? Right, yep. Kind of bringing him in the courtroom. Had the orange, I believe orange. I don't know. Okay, so you actually saw footage of the court? Right, I saw him. Of the court stuff? Right, heard that he was arrested. Okay, and did you watch? One of the prosecutors and a sheriff gave a news conference 2 days in a row. Did you see that? No. Okay. Didn't see no conferences at all. Got it. And so back to Brendan Dassey. What else do you know about him? Or have you heard? A nephew. The nephew was arrested. Brendan Dassey, the name, a nephew, and relation of other than being Stephen Avery's nephew, did you connect up, the charges against Brendan with the charges against Stephen in any way? What do you mean connect? Do you see them linked together, tied together in any way, one affecting the other? I don't know. Just heard about an arrest. I didn't really hear the details on it. If I would have seen the conference or whatever, I would have heard more about it. But I really can't say because I didn't hear a lot about it. I'm trying to sort of explore that. Have you heard anything that Brendan supposedly said? No, no. So, so let's talk about this trial since this is just Stephen Avery's trial. What do you think about innocence or guilt as you sit here now? You have to have the evidence, innocent until proven guilty. Okay, so are you just sort of starting with, hey, I don't know anything, and I assume he's innocent. Let's hear the evidence. Whatever is set out in front of a person, that's how to me, that's how you figure out if they're guilty or innocent. I don't know enough about to say if he is or not. All right, as the case gets started, if you are on the jury and you start hearing the evidence, are you somebody who's going to want to hear both sides? Yep. Does that mean that you think he really better testify? Seriously, I just need to know. I would like to hear. Yeah, I would like to hear, but if he decides not to, there still should be evidence. Okay, and in fact, I think the judge I'm not trying to do his job. I can barely do mine. But I think the judge will tell you that a defendant, somebody charged with a crime, right, can decide to testify. And if he does, then you treat him like any other witness. Right. Decide what you believe or what you don't. Right. Or he can decide not to testify. Is this familiar to you? Right. I think it was mentioned when he spoke before, when we did our questionnaire. Right. I remember him telling us that. Right. And so, that's a tough call, I guess. Can you think of reasons why someone who really didn't do it might not testify? No. All the same? No. Like if he really didn't do it, he would testify? No. Why not testify? Because evidence. You have to look at the evidence. So, in other words, he could just say, hey, I didn't do it, but they can't prove I did, so I'm just going to rely on the fact that they can't prove it, and I'm innocent. Is that something you could accept? Right. And do you know that Mr. Buting and I, as his lawyers, might have something to say about, advising him whether he should or shouldn't testify? Right, yeah, Can you live with that role of the lawyers kind of butting in? Yeah. When I say you can live with it, can you accept? Deal with it? Yeah, it. Accept it? Yeah, These are the rules. Yep, And that's how it works. You were asked a question on the questionnaire to the effect of, when you hear a police officer testify, can you outweigh their testimony just like any other witness? Right. And you said yes. Do you think that there's anything about being a police officer that makes you less likely to lie under oath than any other person who is under oath? No, they're just like you and I. I would see them as that. Okay. They just wear the uniform for their shift and that's it. Yeah, okay. UPS guy have a uniform? Yep. Police officers? Okay. If you're allowed to serve on this jury, are you willing to let the police officers just be human like everyone else? Yeah. Not going to hold them to a higher standard? No. Okay. By the way, have you been sitting back there all day? Yep. And you would normally be sleeping from about 8 to 4 or something? I get home at 7:30. I lay down from about 8:30 to about 1:30. And on the weekend, I sleep like a normal person. So it works out pretty good for me. Some people, it don't. Okay, so have you bumped into anybody you know? Here? Yeah. No. Okay, and it gets pretty loud. There's a joke teller in there. Okay, all right. Are people talking about this case at all? Or they just... No, they were talking about jokes. How long it's taking. We're timing it. About 45, 50 minutes a person. All right. About where everybody works, they were just asking. Yeah. Trying to get to know each other. Will you take a hit financially if you get stuck on this jury for 6 weeks? No. You'll be all right with work? Yep, And any concerns about, your kids aren't real young, but do you have any concerns about being away from them? No, there's 13 and 16. They may be at that age where they want you away for a while. Yeah, there's another one to run them to basketball or whatever. Okay, did you grow up on a farm? No, in the city. Attorney Strang. I think that's, just a minute. I'm good. Thank you for being patient. The court. All set? Ms. Dorn, the clerk will take you out of the room. Any motion from either party? Attorney Fallon. No. Attorney Strang. No. The court. Very well. The juror is in. Counsel, before we proceed further, let me take a little inventory here. It's my understanding that, referring to the sheets, 14, 17, and 20 are now being jointly requested to be excused? Attorney Buting. Oh, that was this morning, wasn't it? Attorney Strang. Yeah, 14, 17, 20, 23, and 27. The court. Okay, I have got 14, 17, 20, 23, 27, and 36. Attorney Strang. I don't know about 36. I know I'm going to move to strike him. Attorney Fallon. Just give me a minute. I might be able to join you in that. If I could have a moment, Judge, to check my numbers. The court. All right, let's go off the record for a second. Attorney Strang. Sure. Off the record discussion. The court. Just for the record, counsel, and to confirm again, it's my understanding that the parties are jointly recommending that the following jurors be excused. 14, Anthony Cabot. 17, Brad Erdman. 20, Thomas Kabichka. 23, Audrey Gagnon. 27, Mark Groth. And 36, Jerome Rosinski. There may be others tomorrow, but at least through 36, those are the ones that are jointly recommended? Attorney Fallon. Yes, Judge. Attorney Strang. That's correct. The court. Very well. The court will excuse those jurors. And I don't know if you folks have the information yet. Number 34, Ryan Manley, it turns out, is now a Milwaukee resident. Attorney Fallon. Yes, I think we got information last Monday or afternoon or something. At least I was advised that he had moved to Milwaukee, I guess. The court. All right. So we're going to do 2 more jurors. The next one will be Sharon Thorne. All right. Ms. Thorne, before we begin, the clerk will administer the juror's oath to you. The clerk. Raise your right hand, please. Juror sworn. The clerk. Please be seated. Voir dire examination by Attorney Fallon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you for your patience with us. I understand you've been having some fun at our expense, so I suppose that's deserved. Just wanted to follow up with some questions based on the information that you gave us last Monday in the questionnaire. My name is Tom Fallon. I'm an Assistant Attorney General with the Wisconsin Department of Justice. I'm one of the prosecutors in this case, and I guess I would like to begin with a couple of questions about your work situation. So tell me, where is it you work again? Kroll's? What is that? Kroll's East, Green Bay, as a waitress. Okay, so that's a restaurant then? All right. And how long have you worked there? Just since October. Okay. And prior to that, you worked for a couple of temporary services? Is that a yes? She has got to type down yes or no, so. Okay. The others don't work out too well. What kind of work did you do when you were subbing out, as it were, for the temp service? Factory assembly work. Okay, and how long did you work for those temporary services? ABR, how long did you work for them? About 10 months. Okay, and the flex staff service? About a year. About a year, okay. And then you work for Miro Company? And how long do you work for them? 11 years. What kind of work did you do for Miro? Paragon Electric in Two Rivers. Okay. Assembling timers. So a fair amount of factory work? Right. Piecework, assembly production? Right. Okay, very good. The reason I ask those questions is that, as you have no doubt learned through the process, this case may very well take 6 weeks to try. And when it's all said and done, and if you're selected for the jury, that means you will be here 8-9 hours a day. So our concern is you indicated you didn't think there would be any hardship for you. Having thought all that through and a week to think about it, are you still confident that you'll be able to financially make it through that 6-week period? Yes. All right. Now, in terms of hobbies and interesting things, you indicated you like to fill in puzzles. Are those crossword puzzles or other types of puzzles? Fill-ins. They look like a crossword puzzle. They give you the word and you just fit it into the puzzle. What I was doing all day today. All right, and do you like to do that because you find it challenging or relaxing or any particular reason? Relaxing. Okay, and any other kind of puzzle work that you like to do? No. Okay, so you lived in Manitowoc County all your life? Right. All right, during that time, have you had an opportunity to form any opinions as to the local sheriff's department? Do you think they do a good job in fighting crime? A fair job? A lousy job? Do you have any opinion on that? No problem. I have no. They do their job all right, I figure. In other words, you don't hear any complaints to your... No. Okay. No. Now, the other couple questions I have for you. You indicate you get your news, I guess, primarily from television, not from newspapers. How often do you watch news telecasts? I don't watch much TV at all. You don't? No, I'm not. If you don't get your news from the TV, do you get your news from any other source? No, I don't get a newspaper. Are you a computer person at all? No, I don't have a computer. Okay, now, in response to one question here, if you were aware of the publicity, you didn't answer yes, but you answered further with a brief explanation. And you said, just some news coverage, local Green Bay channels, very little. As a result of that information, you went on to say you haven't really formed any opinions in this case? No. From time to time, do you ever talk about the case or any of the news with any friends or family members or anything like that? No. Okay. If you're not a TV person, what do you do with your spare time? You say, when it's nice outside, I'm outside a lot. I'm sorry? When it's nice outside, I'm outside a lot camping. I like going in the woods, walking my dog. Just hang out with the girls. I mean, having our little coffee clutch. Oh, do you? Okay. Stuff like that. Go out for lunch. All right. And I take it then with some of the women that you hang out with, you don't really talk about the news that much? Just talk about cooking, gardening, and girl stuff. Girl stuff? All right. That's fair. All right. And how often do you get together with the girls and just kick things around? At least a couple times a month. Okay. Do you ever discuss the major events of the day in your office clutch? In your coffee clutch? Well, like when it happened that in the blowing up the building, the World Trade Center? Well, yeah, that was big talk. Sure. Stuff like that, but no, not really. Generally, it's not usually a newsworthy discussion like this. No. Okay, very good. Do you know anyone in the media that you're friends with, or any family members that work in the media that you might talk with from time to time? Nope, none. All right. In terms of the little bit of media coverage that you ever experienced in this case, can you tell us what you do recall about the news that you did see in terms of the information, or what facts you think you may have as a result of the media coverage? I don't really watch it, the news, mainly just the weather. I put it on for the weather and that's it. Okay, very well. So you don't have any particular impressions or what's going on with respect to this case at all? None. Okay. In your work with the temporary services, working with producing and manufacturing products, and working on the assembly line and piecework and things of that sort, were you ever in charge of anyone or supervising anyone in that capacity? No. Okay. Did you ever write any safety guidelines or suggest any safety guidelines or setting up of any when you're working with the equipment or other people in producing? On a safety committee? Yes. Oh, you did? Okay. Tell us about that. Just mark down the dangers on the job that we could see that workers were doing. Okay. And how they were performing and the problems that it could cause. All right. And how did you like that experience, having some input like that? Yeah. Did you find it valuable? Yeah. In terms of coming up with some ideas and guidelines, was that kind of a group process? Is that a yes? Yes, monthly group. All right. And so you would periodically revisit the guidelines and safety concerns? Right. Okay. Do you consider yourself, in terms of evaluating opinions or trying to solve problems or just generally in looking at things in this world, do you consider yourself a detail-oriented person or a big picture type of person? Bottom line approach? Well, I'm not sure. Okay. Have you ever used any magazine or publication, such as Auto Trader, to buy or sell a vehicle? No. Okay. All right. Have you ever read or heard or seen anything in the news or in your discussions with the girls, anything about this Project Innocence in Wisconsin? Nope. All right. Do you know what it is? No. It's a group of professionals based in Madison that seek to exonerate people who were wrongfully accused. Does that ring a bell to you at all? No. Okay. Do you know anything about Mr. Avery's background or his past? None. Not a thing? All right. In terms of your employment situation, and particularly the safety guidelines and concerns and producing these products, would you consider yourself one who follows those rules and guidelines? Yes. And that they are there for a particular reason, for instance, safety or to enhance production? Right. Yes. All right. And you don't have any problem following those rules or anything? No. Now, in this particular case, Judge Willis here, if you're selected, will advise you of some of the rules and principles which will guide us during the course of the trial. Would you be able to follow those rules? Yes. Now, you indicated in your questionnaire you would accept the fact that Mr. Avery is presumed innocent until the state, that's our team here, unless or until we prove him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Can you follow that instruction? Yes. And do you accept that as an important principle? I do. Okay. Now, you have never served on a jury before, is that correct? No, I haven't. All right. Is there any philosophical reason, any moral reason, or religious reason, as you think about your own experiences in life, which gives you a reason to doubt whether you could serve as a juror in this case? No, If you were selected as a juror in this case, would that be all right with you? Fine. Attorney Fallon. All right, that's all I have. The court. Mr. Strang? Attorney Strang. Thank you. Will do your examination by Attorney Strang. Hi, I'm Dean Strang. This is Jerome Buting, Stephen Avery, and he's prosecuting, and we're defending Mr. Avery. All right. And I will tell you right now, I'm not from around here, and I thought I had a pretty good sense of Manitowoc County, but I don't know where Greenleaf is. I know vaguely where County NN is, out in the country. So where is it? 15 miles west of Denmark. 15 miles west of Denmark, by Wrightstown, and so you're near Brown County? Just a little bird out there. You are near Brown County, sort of? Mm-hmm. Actually, across the street is Brown County line. Mm-hmm. And then how far? Between K and Z is where I live, between Kellnersville and Mirabel. There's a little country road between there. Got it. I'm right on the borderline of it all. I have a Greenleaf address. I'm Manitowoc County, township of Cooperstown. It goes on and on. And do you have family around? Mm-hmm. A brother in Appleton. You folks still around? Your folks still around? No, they're both gone. So there's just one brother, but he's over in Appleton? Mm-hmm. I understand Mrs. Kroll died this weekend. Yes, she did. Mm-hmm. 94. 94 years old. Yup. How did you wind up waitressing after doing factory work? My girlfriend, we worked together at Paragon in 1983, and she's been working there for about 5 years, so she got me into the restaurant. She knew I always wanted to leave factory, and I always talked I wanted to get out of the factory. So she said there was openings. She said, why don't you try it? So I did. And how is it? I like it. Kroll's is the place where everybody is a regular, basically. Right. So what do you, as you are warming up people's coffee, what do you chitty-chat with them about? All kinds of things. The weather, whatever's on their mind. Green Bay Packers, of course, because you're in Green Bay. How else? Yes, it's far of coming back. That's another thing. All right. So this sort of suits you. Are you social that way, it sounds like? Oh, yeah. I'm sitting here saying now that I finally have a woman under oath. I could ask what girl talk is, since I've always wondered all my life. Something besides not underneath looking at an engine, changing oil and stuff like that. All right, so look, what do you know about Brendan Dassey? If you don't know anything about Stephen Avery, what do you know about Brendan Dassey? I don't know. Have you ever heard of the name? I went way back to school with the Dassey. Which one? Peter Dassey. And I know a Paul Dassey. I just know because they live in Two Rivers, the name. But I have no idea, for any personal thing about them or anything. Or any connection? No. To this? No. Case? Right. Just lived in Two Rivers all my life, and they lived there too. And the name. Was Peter in your class? No. But you knew him through school? Right. And this is all pretty new to you if you haven't been on a jury before. Mm-hmm. And I don't think you've ever been in trouble, have you? No. And so if you wind up on this jury, which could be 6 weeks, right, and you're going to want to hear from both sides in this case, well, yeah. You can't make a decision until you know what it's all about totally. Yeah. And there's some things that could interfere with that. And I want to talk to you about those and get your take on them. The state, I think, as you've been told a couple times now, the state has the burden of proof in this case. They have to prove Stephen Avery guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, if they can. So flip that around. What does that mean that we have to prove? That he's innocent. Actually, nothing. We don't have to prove anything because they have to prove he's guilty. I don't have to prove he's innocent. Okay. If the judge tells you those are the rules, can you grab onto that and follow those rules? Uh-huh. Is that yes? Yes. I'm sorry. The court reporter will throw a pencil at me or something if I don't get a yes or no out of you. I think it's a natural human thing to want to hear both sides if you're going to be fair and all that. And I'm sure we'll do stuff in this trial, but do you understand we don't have to prove him innocent? We really don't, in the end. Can you follow that rule? Yeah. If you wind up on the jury? Sure. And it's the same thing with him testifying. I don't know. Do you figure that, well, if a guy didn't do it, he would get up on the stand and testify that he didn't do it? It's not that easy. It's not that easy. Why not? It's just not. Actually, it's not that easy. It's not. But I'm wondering why you say so. Just from like the past of what my mom and dad used to say about the legal system and that. Who are they? That's my mom and dad. Yeah, I know, but the way they would talk and that. I mean, just said don't get into trouble because it ain't that easy to get out of it. Okay, it is true. And the judge has also told you, and he will tell you a bunch of times again, I think, that in America, someone who's accused of a crime is presumed innocent. They start the trial that way. They go through the trial presumed innocent. And only if the jury eventually decides at the end that the state proved it beyond a reasonable doubt is the person no longer presumed innocent. He gets found guilty in that case. And that idea that someone is presumed innocent bumps up against, I think in the real world, bumps up against a tendency of people to say, well, he's here, he's sitting in the defendant's table, wouldn't be here if he hadn't done something. And is that, is there a voice in your head saying that too? Just have to wait and see what's all summed up, Do you think he must have done something, though, to be charged and to be here? Apparently. I don't know. Somebody must know something. Question. Somebody has alleged something? Yes. But that's the point. Somebody has made a claim. And that's the point is, he is presumed innocent. I guess that's what we're here to find out. Question. That's why you are here. That's why we have a jury in the end. So, as you say, it's not that easy on whether he testifies or doesn't testify. And I guess what I need to know is, when the judge gives you the rules to follow, are you going to follow them? Of course. And, some things we do because we have to. Some things we do because we believe in it and we want to. Where do you fall on that? On things like being presumed innocent and the state having the burden of proof? Just have to wait and see what I hear and sum it up that way. But are you following those rules because you are told to in that? They are rules you have to follow. Or do you say to yourself, those rules make sense to me, and if I were charged with a crime, that's what I would want? Basically, I will have to just see how it turns out, see what's said, and see how the evidence all goes, and how it all falls in place. That's all I can really say. Can't say he's guilty, can't say he's not guilty. I don't know. But can you presume that he's not guilty? Apparently. Maybe. I don't know. This is perfect. You are being very straight with me, which is what I need, to help me make decisions about whether we want you or not. And if you're going to be on the jury, you have got to get past apparently or maybe. And it's okay to tell me if you're not going to get past apparently or maybe. Attorney Fallon, I'm going to object to that. There's a mischaracterization of the law, at least in terms of, I don't want to argue in front of her. The court. There is some ambiguity in the question. Let's move on to the next question. Question. You will be asked to take an oath if you are on the jury that you are going to follow the judge's instructions. I'll be able to, yes. Presuming him innocent is one of those. Right. There's a bunch of other instructions too. Okay. You think you'll be able to do that? Yes. So let me just come out and ask you, do you want to be on this jury? Sure. Why? I find it interesting. I never done it before. Just find it interesting. What if this trial goes 6 weeks and takes you away from your life for 6 weeks? I'm aware of that already. And you still want to do it? Sure. Just for the new experience? Just because it's interesting? Or is there any other reason? It's a lifetime experience. I may never be able to do it again. Do what? To be in court to make the decision? Okay. Attorney Strang. Thank you. The court. Anything else, Mr. Fallon? Attorney Fallon. Nothing, thank you. The court. Very well. The clerk will escort you out of the courtroom at this time, Ms. Thorne. Any motion from either party? Attorney Fallon. None from the state. Attorney Strang. None here. The court. All right. Ms. Thorne will be in the jury pool or panel.